Welcome back to the Surplus of Suffering podcast, where we believe that life is suffering, but our minds are powerful. Today is episode 7, and we are talking about scarcity and overcoming the scarcity mindset. My name is Brett, and I'm here today with Soul.
How's it going, everybody? I can't wait to talk about scarcity mindset and how we can dive into more abundance because that's what it's all about, okay? We live in a beautiful earth that has everything we need as long as we can shift our powerful minds and find it all around us.
Yes, and they are mindsets, but they're also literal things. The abundance mindset coming from or the scarcity mindset coming from what you need. Everyone needs to eat, everyone needs shelter, everyone needs water. Those those are things we all need, but the mindset around security of the things we need or the security of the things we want. Um, there are so many ways to interact with that, and so how you frame it in your mind and how you hold your beliefs can really change how everything manifests.
That's right. Because we do have to deal with those very real life things of money, of food, our relationships, and based on how we grow up is going to determine our mental patterns of how we've grown up to think about these things over time. And whatever happens to us, whether fortunate or misfortunes, we're going to create some kind of mental pattern of what that means for us and what that means about the world. And whatever we believe is going to be how we experience our life. And that's why it's so important for us to understand that a scarcity mindset is just a mental pattern of how you've learned to view the world or view yourself or view other people and what they want and what you'd ultimately deserve. So we have the ability to change how we think about things and we can change the way we experience our lives.
Yeah, and sometimes we need to change it or adjust it. You mentioned how you were raised, and I think it's a good opportunity to talk about children, just in general. Children aren't quite wise yet. They're new to life. So, and some children are put into a scarcity environment where the mindset is somewhat needed to survive, or it's just developed in that towards that direction. And some children are, developed in an environment where there's abundance and resources are plentiful and they don't need to worry about these things. But I think there are positive and negatives to being raised on either one, and so trying to find that balance is a central theme we keep talking about. And so we're going to talk about some of the surpluses of suffering that might lead there. When I was a child, I guess, for example, I was so afraid of not having enough food. And it wasn't because my family couldn't really afford food. It was because my brother kept eating the food that I was trying to save. And and it over time it led me to eating faster and faster, because if I didn't eat fast, that meant I wasn't going to eat as much
Mm.
as I would. And it kind of just that got reinforced over time and time again, until I was old enough to be eating with college people, and I got my hand in front of my plate without even realizing it. I'll put my arm up, or like sharing appetizers, the hell that sharing appetizers is at a restaurant, because I'm like, I want to eat the whole thing, or I don't know how to share properly, and because I for some reason, subconsciously even, I'm thinking there's not enough, or how are we going to handle, I'm using so much of my brain thinking about an appetizer that's coming, rather than connecting with the people that when you go to dinner, you hopefully you're connecting and telling and talking with the people and bonding with the people you're there with. So that's just a silly example, but I think some people might relate to the food example.
Oh, that's a beautiful example too of, you know, as children, we don't really know, and then all these patterns get created because yeah, you did have to protect your food at one point, and that was the norm for you. You're like, if I want to finish my meal, I better protect it from my brother who's going to be taking it from me at any point. And really good on you to have that awareness later on, because like you said, it's robbing you from, it's taking a lot of mental energy from you being present with your loved ones, right? Sharing a meal. It's not about just surviving anymore. If you have the abundance mindset, you can always get a little bit more, right? You can always order some more. and everyone at the table can be happy. Unfortunately, your brother, he wanted to be happy by taking more of your food and not being nice, and you guys didn't learn how to share in that instance.
There was one infamous scenario where we were splitting a bag of M&Ms, and I was so adamant about splitting the bag 50-50 that there was an odd number, and me and my brother, he's older than me, we're fighting over this last odd M&M, who gets one more than the other. And I felt like it was such an injustice that he was trying to take the uneven. I felt I really deserved it, and it was such, and he we ended up yeah, there was blood involved. He punched me or something. Like, I don't know if either one of us got the M&M even. It's just kind of a metaphor for the episode of we're both just fighting over this, when honestly, yeah. And scarcity often has to do with, I think of capitalism, I think of money, I think of business. And every college class you take on economics has some assumptions around scarcity, and just every single participant in the economy or in this world is trying to maximize their gain and or utility as a consumer. And uh, that works in theory for economics, but sometimes that's not the best path for a group or a village or a community. And those are tricky things to fish out, because we live in a capitalistic society here in America, and we're here to talk about the mindsets, and so that's why it's somewhat relevant to bring that up.
Yeah, yeah. Both of those things that you just said made me think of the fact that when you're in a scarcity mindset, you believe that someone else's gain is your loss, right? If someone else is winning, then you're somehow losing,
Yeah,
right?
they say that in the stock market too, and so much money is moving around in the stock market by traders who aren't producing a product. They're just moving money around, and it's not like in the old days when everyone in a village had a role
Mm.
to play in providing and in doing their part in society.
Yeah, yeah. And when you live in those types of communities, you don't ever have to worry that there isn't enough to go around because everyone's taking care of one another. And that idea that there isn't enough to go around is what is at the core of that scarcity mindset, right? That we have
Mm.
to hoard, that we have to be the ones that win because there isn't enough for everybody. But
If you're not winning, you're losing, apparently. But
mhm.
maybe life's not about winning and losing altogether. I think one of the things that makes me think about is one of the ways a scarcity mindset can lead to detriment is the development of greed. You know, and I'm not proud to say that I've been greedy in my time. And, as a kid in the M&M, it's like, haha, I was a kid. But greed can develop when scarcity mindset is so much so that you're trying to get your security at all costs. And providing your security might mean taking it away from someone else, or I think I've heard this analogy of a pond that has fish in it, and the pond will reproduce fish at a certain rate. And let's say there's a village of people, and it's the perfect rate for the village. Everyone can get one fish, whatever, when they go there. But as soon as one person grabs two fish, or a couple of people, or someone grabs three or four fish, then they're not reproducing as quickly. It can start a cascade of effects. The second one person kind of takes more than what they need,
Mhm.
all of a sudden there's not enough for everybody. And then the next time around, whoever didn't get a fish is pretty upset. So they show up early the next day, grab even more fish, and then
Mhm.
the pond goes dead, when really there was a sustainable um, availability of the resource before somebody decided their needs were above others. Not that their needs weren't above others, but it's all about the belief, like, okay, I need more than these other people, or I deserve more than these other people, or I'm afraid if I don't take more than these other people, it's still not going to be enough.
Right. And there's also that trust aspect of things. Because
Mm.
for that to work, you kind of have to trust that everyone is going to not be greedy and they're not going to take more than they need. But because we know that people are greedy, it's like, well, then we should be greedy as well. And that's what, the economists say is what every rational economist would do is be as greedy as possible because we're expecting everyone to be as greedy as possible. but I think fundamentally that keeps us stuck in scarcity.
Yeah, it's not a fun place to be. In the textbook, it's fine because you need to make some baseline assumptions in order to turn it into numbers and math
Yeah, a
and
model.
predict. Yeah, you know, my degree's in statistics and Soul has a background in math. We understand the number side of things. It's not like we don't get that, but we've also understand how it can lead to detriment when you are in survival mode, when you have this fear of security. My dad describes his time, my parents were married from about 1 to 10 years old, and he describes the time that my parents were still married as just he was in survival mode. He was trying to provide for the family, the money side of things, and he was just trying to, lift weights and live. It just and it he tells me now that he wishes he did it a little differently, that his mindset was somewhere else, but it has a large part to do with how he was raised. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about. So the earlier you can become aware of where am I on the spectrum of scarcity and abundance, or greed and generosity, because we haven't even mentioned generosity yet, which, arguably the opposite of greed. Some people are generous at heart, and maybe you thought they were like that, nature versus nurture. Maybe you thought someone did just born generous, but some people are taught or shown that generosity is empowering and is good, and it helps you make connections. It helps foster the best overall outcome for everybody.
Yeah, when you give, you get.
That's true.
But yeah, one thing I wanted to definitely say about greed is that one way to look at it is as fear disguised as desire. Because as we said before, it's all about the idea that the more you get, the more you're securing your safety, right? It's being in that survival mindset, like your dad was, right? We need to survive. I got to put food on the table, and that's a very real thing, right? It's survival is a scary thing to put that at as something that's going to be taken away. So it's easy to fall into those fears and then maybe not make the most generous decisions and take more than you need. And you could argue with like, well, sometimes you have to do that. But I would like to live in a world where we can acknowledge that there's more than enough for everyone and that no one has to take more than they need because everyone knows that there is nothing to fear. We're all going to have our needs met. We don't have to take more than we need. And as we give, we are sharing happiness, we are sharing love, and that is going to ultimately fill your cup more than any material good will ever do.
Yes, giving and serving, statistically, I don't need to talk about one study. Like, it's shown that people are more fulfilled and happy when they're able to do that for other people. But some people's needs aren't met, and they never get met. And it's pretty hard to overcome that, or to act like people in those situations like it's easy. It's harder for some people than others. My dad was in survival mode, but I'm sure if you added money to his bank account, he would have still been in survival mode. In fact, I know
Mm-hmm.
that's true for him, and not just him, but many other people. There's an old story of the miser and his gold. Uh, it's a story about a man who has a stockpile of gold, and he buries it in his garden. And when he tends to the garden, every day he counts it, he picks it up, he digs it up, and he counts it. And he kind of indulges himself into, yes, here's my money, this is my security. It was like a source of security and happiness, and he would admire it every day. But he did it so often, somebody noticed, and a thief came and took his gold. So one day, the next day, he came back and noticed there was a hole in the ground. His gold wasn't there, and he was grieving his loss of the gold and security that he admired so much. And a passerby told him that he never spent the gold, so there might as well have been a rock in that hole. It might as well have been nothing because you weren't going to spend it. So what was the use of that gold if you weren't going to spend it, other than your own? I use the word indulgence for a reason, because it kind of feeds the ego, like, oh, look at all my money. And to enjoy your money by just looking at it is so counterintuitive. It really just manifests, that is greed, and that is, I think, the ego kind of engaging with just talking yourself up, or your self-worth just because you have a pile of gold doesn't make you a good person or a successful person. It's what you do
Mm,
with your gold,
mm,
metaphorically speaking.
right. Yeah, you don't want to tie your worth to whatever external circumstance or your pile of gold or whatever it is. You're
And I know what it's like to do that. It's yeah, you don't want to do that. It's a dangerous path, right?
yeah, it's very dangerous because if your sense of self-worth is tied to anything outside of the truth about your self-worth, then it's going to oscillate and you're going to have a surplus of suffering there that isn't necessary if you always know your worth, right? If you always know the truth about yourself, that you are worthy of whatever you want, and with your powerful mind you can find any solution to whatever problem that life faces you with, right? If you have an abundance mindset, to me is the same as saying you have a positive outlook, or you want to be a realist about what's going on. You don't want to pretend that there isn't a problem, but you can say, okay, there is this problem, I acknowledge it, but I also acknowledge that I can solve this problem. I'm going to put time to it, I'm going to figure it out, I'm going to take the steps needed to get out of this perceived problem and turn it into a solution, into some kind of gain.
Yeah, it fosters creativity because, like you said, there's a problem, and I'm going to try to fix this, and I have the ability, having the faith in yourself. I think faith is tied to abundance, and people think, oh, God, and tithing is the thing, but really, the faith that this is a solvable problem, and maybe there's a way that I can solve this that is different than maybe that it was thought to be, or there's something new, and creativity can be described through the arts, through music, or just simply through thinking outside of the box in a business situation. So it it's reflected in that, and so anyone who has a desire to be more creative, to be more generous, to be able to collaborate and practice faith in their own abilities, would be interested in maybe examining if they can practice an abundance mindset.
Right. Right. And all of that just makes me think of how easy it is to compare yourself to others in any way. And in doing that, you kind of you kind of fall short of what you fall short of what you have in a way. Like you already you it doesn't matter how much you've already achieved, but as soon as you compare yourself to someone, you might perceive that there's some kind of lack now, because they're like, oh well, compared to
Yeah.
them, I don't have that much. So boom, you just put yourself into a lack mindset when, had you not compared yourself, you could have just said, wow, look at all the stuff that I have, look at all the stuff that I've worked on, look how far I've come.
Yeah. Yeah, instead of look how far I've come and look what we've been able to get, it's more you see other people and you think, oh, the perceived lack, you said, so you're behind. I don't have the thing that that person has. As a kid, being I mentioned being a kid again because I think that's the purest form of not really knowing what, not really realizing what you're doing. Like I remember seeing kids. I had my needs met and I had everything I needed to be happy, but if I saw a kid that had a certain gaming system or they had certain luxuries that I didn't have, I was just ruminating on that. I was using my powerful mind thinking about what I didn't have
Mm,
when there was so much to think about what you did have. And as an adult now, I see certain kids and I see that they're living in a world of abundance, but their mind is in a scarcity world. Like they think they don't have enough because somebody else has this or and the idea that it's never enough or these kids are never going to be happy, and because if they're not, if the mindset isn't adjusted to teach the idea that resources aren't exactly infinite, but that doesn't mean you have to act like they're scarce.
yeah. Like if we divide things up generously and properly, then there is enough for everyone. Like I already know that, like years ago we figured out that we can feed everyone on earth, but we don't do it. But we have all the technology, we have all the means, and it's a real shame that there isn't more thought and effort being put into solving this excess of suffering at the most base level, right? Like if you don't have enough food, you can't really step above and use your powerful mind for anything else if you're literally stuck in survival, right? So why can't we give everyone the chance to get out of that and give them a chance to find those creative things that they're able to give back to the world? Because I think everyone has some kind of genius in something. Everyone has a gift that they can share with the world and add value to the world. And because of that, everyone deserves to also be taken care of by the world because we all have stuff to give, right? We all want to give to the world. We all have things to share, and we should all be able to receive for it, not being taken away because of someone else's greed and someone else's scarcity mindset.
Yeah, and that sounds great. It's even hard for me to hear you say that and believe it, because it's just we're all siloed off from each other, and there's income inequality surrounding us in this country, but all and on a global scale, there's so many different um, levels of quality of life. Um, but with that said, um, there is generosity, there is charity, and there I was trying to do research on charity and how different populations treat it. And it was hard to get accurate data. I was reading data about reporting uh, donations to the IRS or itemized deductions to the IRS about charities. And some of the biggest donations, because a dollar is a dollar. So a dollar, I mean, if someone donates $10 billion or $60 billion or whatever, if they're a billionaire already, it may not seem like a lot if they're or 60 million or so, but like $60 million can still make a huge impact, even if it's not a large proportion of someone's entire wealth. But with that said, uh, some people are willing to give up more proportions of their what they have than others, and I brought this up because there are levels of charity, and in Judaism there's something called tzedakah, and hopefully I pronounced that right. But there are 8 levels of charity, and the highest the levels are based off of how pure the charity is. The lowest level of charity being a reluctance, kind of almost coerced into giving or sharing, and the highest level being providing self sustainability to somebody, teaching someone how to fish, providing a method for them to provide for themselves. But then also right below that is anonymously donating to an anonymous recipient and through a mediator of some kind. So it's kind of like it's not feeding the ego. It's so separated from the ego because you're giving, you're giving, you're helping somebody, but you're not saying I need a thanks, so you're not saying I need to see their reaction or else
Mm-hmm.
that money just disappeared. But it went to somebody in need. Then that's one of the purest forms of charity, and I think it's good to think about it that way, because some people give expecting something back, and then if they don't get something back, then something's wrong.
Right. And yeah, you're right because it's not tied to the ego when all you want to do is help. It's not so that you feel better, you feel like you did something, but it's cuz you want to see other people be happy and succeeding, and that brings you joy.
And if you're not in touch with that joy, then you might have an issue with, I'll use the word jealousy lightly, because we were talking about comparing earlier and how comparison kind of is the thief of joy. But jealousy is an emotion I would tie to the scarcity mindset, because you're more likely to be jealous when there's something that you don't have that somebody else has, or you're more likely to be jealous when you feel like you deserve more than you have, or you worked harder than somebody else, and maybe you did, but the outcomes aren't always equitable for the work put in. But so jealousy makes sense sometimes, but there are instances of a surplus of suffering where jealousy is consuming a mind that it doesn't need to consume on a level or intensity that isn't doesn't need to exist.
Right. Right. I feel jealousy should be reframed as just your whoever you're being jealous of, they're actually giving you insight into yourself. They're making you aware that you have a desire for something, and you can thank them for saying, "Thank you for letting me know that that's something that I want. I'm happy that you're enjoying it." And then you can go ahead and pursue it. But just because they have it and you don't doesn't mean anything about you. Like, oh no, I'm not good enough. Or it means that they're better than you in any way. Like, you don't have to compare at all. It's just, oh, that's another way that I can live my life. That's awesome. I can add that to the things that I want to create for myself. But don't let it rob you of everything that you already have just by shifting into lack.
It's hard to translate it to that signal of thank you for like thank you for showing me, and that's something I can now pursue, because some instances of jealousy come from a place of, I think of when I was playing Ultimate on a competitive level. I met some amazing athletes, and sometimes I was the best one on the field, or I was the fastest. Well, usually I could jump high. I was the highest jumper on the field, or something like that. And so, whenever I would see someone more athletic than me, and yeah, I had room to grow. Like, oh, I should channel that into motivation to keep training, and is kind of the right mindset you were saying. But sometimes I didn't realize how much my ego maybe was inflated, in that I would be upset that uh, I wasn't as
Mhm.
fast as somebody, or I couldn't stop as quick as some of their attributes were better than mine. So I was focusing on, because I often focus on my weaknesses. I'm trying to be excellent. I'm trying to excel at all costs. And okay, well, if I want to excel, then I need to focus on. So whenever someone was strong in an area that I was weak, it would it would bother me more than I'm proud to say. Not that I wished bad upon them. I'm proud to say that I was never that ruthlessly jealous, but sometimes it felt like, well, there's no world in which, if you compare yourself to a professional athlete, well, there's no world where I'm going to meet those standards. But you don't need to hold yourself to those high standards. It's there's a balance to that, of where your expectations are of yourself, and where jealousy can be channeled into signal, or into motivation, or into inspiration. Uh, because the mind is powerful. This is a belief you can choose to have.
Right. And it's all about how you're perceiving things. Uh, the lack is only there if your ego is the one that's taking charge, because the ego always seeks validation. The ego is the one that's trying to compare, and it's trying to accumulate things to make itself feel significant, because the ego itself doesn't think that it is significant or worthy, because the ego ultimately isn't real. It's not the truth of who you are. But the truth of who you are, deep down in your soul, you know you're worthy of whatever it is that you seek, right? You were created in a perfect magical way, basically. Like the body that you have, the mind that you have, it is a powerful tool. And it's all about how you choose to use it, to not let the ego try to get you to say, oh, maybe I can be better than them, or have more than them, or get ahead of them, because then it'll mean that I'm worthy, then it'll mean that I'm good, then that I'll be safe. Right? All of that is taking you away from what is really important in the world, right? Taking you into separation and competition instead of compassion,
Yeah.
love, sharing. Because, oh God, like, yeah, it might feel so good to win and be that you're the best, but it could also be so isolating if you're not willing to share and then teach what you know. Like, I don't know. They really are opposing mindsets.
Yeah, because competition can be fun. But I know some people who are so locked into competition, or people who are sore losers, maybe you could say. But I also know a few people who are, I call them great losers, but they're not good at losing in the sense that they're bad at something. It's more
Yeah.
like when they do lose, or when they aren't the winner, they're very able to move on past that, or put a smile on their face and actually be happy, uh, and maybe say, you know what, it was fun. I didn't come out on top, but I had fun doing it. And that's a goal, that balance, because jealousy is one thing, but there's an opposite of jealousy most people have never heard of. It's called compersion.
Right. Yeah.
So compersion being, you're able to feel the joy of somebody else's success, even if it has nothing to do with you. So, instead of being jealous that stumbled upon a $20 bill or $1,000, let's say, you could actually, conversion would be like, you're so purely happy as if you just found $1,000. You're like, oh my God, I can't, like, maybe your friend needed it really bad and you're just really enjoying it. And I've actually first learned about conversion when I watched a video on swingers or something, and basically
Mm.
it's such a big topic in relationships. We haven't talked about intimate relationships yet, but I said monotonous relationships, but I meant to say
Monogamous.
yes, the monogamous relationships. Uh, Jealousy can be manifested on both sides, and I think on the masculine side of things, men are often think they're protecting or controlling, but there's jealousy rooting from that. And on the female side of things, or feminine side of things, we've seen I'm not even allowed to interact with other women and without it being a problem. So it ranges so strongly, but it can be harming because our brain is a tool, as you said, and if you use the tool against yourself, it's just gonna be just as effective in the negative direction. But why did I bring up jealousy or oh yeah, the swingers. Basically, there was a documentary style video on a swingers resort where, okay, how did you guys was there any jealousy in your relationship? And a lot of the swinger couples did say yes, there was a little bit of it, but we were able to work together and it wasn't easy. Not that, and this isn't like, I'm not saying everyone should aspire to not be monogamous. That's not what I'm advocating for. But the fact that there are people able to be together and stay married and still like do that was something the documentary was exploring. And then they brought up conversion. Like, okay, well, if my wife is enjoying, is having a great experience and is excited to come back to me and you trust the wife and she's faithful and their relationship was actually well balanced, then it actually, they made the case that it worked for them.
Right.
And that was fascinating to see. It wasn't aspirational by any means, and but it's interesting to see how the mind can lend itself towards something
Yeah.
as different as that.
Yeah, and that truly seems to work for some people. And yeah, they are practicing like kind of extreme yeah, I guess compersion is the word, but it's like extreme feeling happiness for someone else's happiness without your ego being involved. Like no attachments, like I love you
No
and
attachment.
however you decide to be happy,
Yeah.
I support it. Like my ego is not involved. Whatever you do means nothing about myself, and I trust that there is love here and we're going to keep being respectful to each other, communicating with one another. And as long as that's what's happening, then yeah, both parties can be happy and they can be happy seeing the other person being happy and then spending time together and being happy together. Not needing it to be only exclusively with that person.
And but I also believe there can be on the extreme end, because we're always talking about balance. On the extreme end of that, like if your ego's so not engaged and you feel that way so strongly, it might actually lead to detriment. Or maybe, in an intimate example of intimate partners, maybe they do find somebody who they'd rather be with, and then and I'm not trying to instill the fear of jealousy but I'm just trying to say
Mm-hmm.
there is a balance
Oh yeah.
between being if in the example I was giving, between being jealous and trying to control, or being or having compersion and feeling good for enjoying your partners because you trust and there's a healthy level of trust.
Yeah, I've heard it be argued that there's a healthy level of jealousy too, like in committed relationships where it is monogamous, where, ideally you are going to be respectful of each other's boundaries and you're not going to be putting yourself in situations where your partner would be uncomfortable or you're putting yourself in a situation where, things that aren't supposed to happen could happen because that's not being the best partner that you could be, right? And there's that trust that you aren't doing those things. But if for example, like if you make a new friend and you don't realize that, like, oh, that friend's actually interested in you, then it makes perfect sense that your partner would be jealous of like,
Mm.
hey,
Yeah.
this person is definitely interested in you. You shouldn't
Alert.
hang out
Yeah.
with them. Like that's totally reasonable. Letting them know like, oh shoot, I didn't see the signals. My bad. I was just being friendly. As an example of like, that jealousy being there just means, hey, I'm willing to stand up for my relationship. And there's a healthy way and an unhealthy way to do it, because you could be jealous of every person that your partner talks to, and it's like, well, hey, they still have to live their lives. They can't just avoid half of the population forever, and or just be rude and assholes because, oh, you hold the door for someone else. How dare you hold the door for another
Yeah.
lady? Like, what? Let me hold the door for people. Like, I'm kind, why not?
Yeah, and everyone has their thresholds, and I think I invite the audience to share any couples you may know where they function a certain way, a certain dynamic. But I've seen surpluses of suffering related to jealousy, whether it's the person who's jealous or whether it's the person who is on the other side of that jealousy. Um, I have a story related to a surplus of suffering and jealousy. I was with a partner, and I'm an honest person almost to a fault, and they got a job somewhere where they knew someone who I had a crush on in college. And so they were around someone who had a crush on, and that was years before, and I assured them that it had not, I don't talk to that person anymore. This isn't something I think about anymore, but I need to let you know that there was a time, and because I back in college,
Mm,
I told this person I had a crush on them, and it didn't, it wasn't reciprocal. So
mm,
I was honest with the partner, right?
yeah,
And I think that's the right thing to do, right? They wouldn't want me to hide that information,
yeah.
but it turned into
Festered in their
it
mind.
couldn't, yeah, festered in their mind. And honestly, I don't blame them. I think they were predisposed to already be that way, and there was no way I could have provided that information to them that wouldn't. They were using their powerful mind
Mm,
against them as strongly as they could, to the point where this person who I had a crush on in the past was taking up so much of their brain, and therefore a lot of my brain, because it impacts both partners.
yeah.
My current wife is so in touch with my. Sometimes I have a touch of jealousy if there's like a friend, like if a good-looking guy makes her laugh, like, yeah, if it's like I help him out, I'll like ah. But she's so aware of my emotions that the second I start feeling that way, she's like, she knows I'm feeling that way, and that's not everybody. A lot of people don't realize it, and maybe it goes on a little longer than it should or further than it should, and that's when when it gets extreme enough, when people can't regulate the jealousy or the anger or
Mm,
the emotional side of all that. And regulating emotions is hard. The more extreme, the more intense they are, I mean, the more likely impulsive behavior is going to happen, or you're going to say something you wish you didn't
right.
related to this.
Yeah. And I wonder, what do people think about it? Was it the right thing to do to say that? Some people might argue, you know what? In the past, doesn't need to be said, right? It doesn't add anything. You just keep acting like she's the one, and you don't got to worry about it. Or is it better to just be honest and be like, hey, let's just put it on the table. It happened. But then, yeah, it's like, oh, then your mind starts thinking, and is it gonna focus on the right thing? I guess it's up to the person. But I wonder what the
Both people,
audience has to say about that. But regardless,
yeah,
I love what you said about the relationship thing, because it made me think like everyone is gonna have different kinds of jealousy, or they're going to have different standards, right? Or different boundaries for different things are going to make them feel insecure or in the relationship. And any person that's in a relationship, they should want the other person to feel secure regardless of where they're coming from, right? Maybe to us it seems like, well, maybe this is a little unreasonable, but hey, this is your
yeah,
partner. You should try to make them feel as secure in the relationship as possible. And if maybe they have some growing to do in that sense, then help them grow, and and stick with them through that growth. But at the same time, it's good to be aware. Like, it's really awesome that she's aware
yeah,
that you're feeling those feelings, and she can reassure you in those moments. Like, it goes a long way than to spend 15 minutes like, oh, I feel uncomfortable that you're close to my girl and y'all having a really good time, and I'm just thinking these thoughts that like I know at the end of the day she's my wife and our relationship is good, but in those moments when you're feeling that way, it's nice to have that reassurance of like, hey, you ain't got nothing to worry about, babe, or whatever it is.
Exactly. I want everyone deserves that, I think, because
Yeah.
I really, like you're saying, it's important to be aware because maybe your partner needs to grow in that way, and that doesn't mean they're not ever going to grow in that way, or they're not, the insecurities will never be uh you know tamed. It's it's just that, like you said, everyone can be insecure, and sometimes people's curiosity, or the almost need, the many times I've been asked, like, am I your ideal body type, or am I your ideal whatever, and asking you very specific questions of, like, about being your partner, and I want to be honest every single time. It's like, well, what is ideal? It's like, you are ideal. Like, I
Yeah.
need to. I found ways to answer that honestly without making them reinforcing any of those insecurities, because they're not what's on my mind.
Yeah, and that's where the
And
question is coming from. That's why a lot of those
yeah,
questions can feel like a trap because
yeah,
they're coming in a way like unconsciously they're trying to validate this fear, or they're trying to get rid of it. They're trying to say like, "Hey, reassure me,
yeah.
right? Make sure."
Help me with this fear I have, real quick. And if they said that, then I'd be like, oh yeah, no problem, I'll do that. And like, I've heard people say, like, yeah, I want you to lie to me in certain situations. It's like, okay, well, it's tricky. You want me to specifically lie here and there, but if I lie in this other way, then it's like, how could you betray me like that? And I'm just joshing, but
No, yeah, it's
it,
true
it
though. That
is it is a
balance,
tap dance.
and the way that the questions are asked too is very important because sometimes a poorly phrased question, it doesn't matter what answer you're gonna get. It's not gonna sound good. It's not gonna sound honest. So if you need some reassurance, I think it's better to be clear that that's what we need, and not go ways around it because yeah, it's not gonna sound genuine, especially when the question is kind of like, do you really care about me? Do you really love me? And it's like, well, how, like there's not much that I can say when that's already being put into question. It's easier for me to get defensive, like, well, what do you mean? Of course I do. Versus I this is something that I used to do with my girlfriend. I would always say, instead of whenever you need reassurance, instead of saying how much do you love me, say or like instead of saying do you love me, ask me how much do you love me, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's a good
already,
one.
you're acknowledging that the love is there, and now you're giving me the chance to express it in different ways and remind you of all the different things that I love about you without saying is there even love here? It's kind of what it sounds like to me, but I've learned like, okay,
Yeah.
there, you're just asking for reassurance. You're not putting into question my love for you.
Yeah, and these issues are so multifaceted, because now what you're talking about is effective communication, which we have episode 5 on
There's
communication. But
lots,
it's like,
yeah.
that's important. These are complicated things, and so the topics layer on top of each other, and we're trying to order them in a way that makes sense, because communication can help solve a lot of these surpluses of suffering related to jealousy or greed, or
Yeah, scarcity in general. I guess the
yeah, scarcity in general. Because the framing matters also. Framing. I think of framing when I think of my major statistics, and how you can frame options or outcomes, and people can perceive an outcome as good or bad based off of the other outcomes that were possible or that happened. And I want to call out Beast Games season 1. There was a Mr. Beast offered people to eliminate themselves. There's a $5 million cash prize at the winner, as famously he'll tell you, and people could eliminate themselves, and then they would get a share of $1 million. But then, so as people eliminated themselves, okay, it's like, okay, I'm going to get a million. It's like two people eliminate themselves, they each get 500,000. So it kept going up and up, and people were eliminating themselves until it got about $20,000.
mm,
And then nobody else. Basically, they had the option to eliminate themselves for $20,000, which, if you removed yourself from the whole situation of the game show, uh, $20,000 is probably a worthwhile decision, when I think there was about 1,000 people competing for this
yeah.
money, and a lot of games of chance were, like, used to, like, eliminate people after this. So, but no one, people stopped eliminating themselves at about $20,000. because they were trying to stay in it and make some more money. And I think the possibility of 5 million was so much compared to a measly 20,000, when in reality they
Right.
could have gone through less suffering, taking less risk, bring home $20,000, which is a life changing amount for just about anybody. But Beast Games, they chose their clientele or whoever their contestants very carefully. I think they chose the people who they knew were going to be in it to win it for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and that begs the question, how much is enough? Right?
Yeah,
Everyone's got to come up with that on their own. And it's a funny thing to ask yourself, like, what is enough for me to actually be content and feel like I have enough? Because that's gonna be different for everyone, but there's peace and happiness based on where that answer is in time.
yeah. It depends on where you're at. Also, your frame of mind at the time. I have to share a personal story. Last episode, I shared about calling off an engagement that put me into a state of guilt and social isolation. And this is a very unrelatable story, but I happened to have money in a penny stock investment at that time. And after I called off the engagement, while I was so down on myself, this penny stock went up and I gained a lot of net worth very quickly. And I didn't feel like I deserved it for one. It freaked me out. It wasn't a burden, but I was mentally ill. I wasn't in a position to capitalize on the sudden influx of opportunity in the form of money. And as a result, I didn't make the right decisions. I never really had the money. I had access to the money, right? And but because I didn't make all the right decisions or the best decisions with that money, I was upset with myself after when I got on the other side of everything happening with the breakup. I then lost sleep over the fact that, why didn't you make this financial decision, or why didn't you make that financial decision, or you had the chance to do this. And there's, especially with the stock market, there's so many should have, could have, would have's that are going to occur on a daily basis. So I wouldn't advise anybody playing around with stocks unless they know how to regulate those emotions. And if you don't, and obviously not financial advice, but don't risk money you can't afford to lose. Not to get off topic too far, but
Oh,
money is relevant when it comes to jealousy, when it comes to greed, when it comes to generosity. So, and then the mindsets too. I think a lot of successful entrepreneurs would tell you an abundance mindset is is a way to manifest your success
yeah.
for that very reason.
I heard it from very successful people. They always said, always have a positive mental attitude. Right? Any seeming failure has the seed for an equal or greater opportunity. So as long as you have that mindset, no matter the loss, no matter whatever seemingly lacking, scarcity inducing, fear inducing um, situation that you're in, there is a seed for an opportunity for something good to happen. And if you shift your mind to it, that's when you have the most likeliness, the better odds of finding it. And and going back to what we were talking about earlier about scarcity mindset and how we're programmed as kids with it, it reminds me of that book like Rich Dad Poor Dad, of this kid that basically
Mm-hmm.
like had two dads, right? And one was really wealthy, and every time he talked to him, he was talking about investing and moving your money around and all of this, like having people work for you and creating wealth, versus the other one was just like, get a job, save your money. And you,
Yeah.
like you can see that there's different ways that we can think. And also how we said earlier, like even when you do have the success, even when you do have all the money, if you're still thinking about it in terms of lack, or what you still don't have, or that you still don't feel like it is enough, then it basically robs all of that success from you, even though you have it, which
Mm-hmm.
is a terrible thing to suffer from when you already have the abundance around you literally manifested, but you can't enjoy it, and you're still like, I heard of someone that became
Yeah.
very very successful, and they were still buying like one ply toilet paper, and the wife was like, why can't we upgrade, like we have more than enough to do this. And the guy was like, oh, I don't know, it's, we have to save money. Like he still had the scarcity mindset. Like, well, we just have to save. And it wasn't until he talked to one of this guy's coach. He had a coach, and every successful person, they always say like, well, I always have someone like making sure I'm on top of my game, right? And as they were talking about this problem, because it became a surplus of suffering in his own life, like my wife is upset,
Yeah.
right? My wife's upset that I still buying the one ply, and he's like, dude,
Yeah.
I know your net worth. You could buy like all like a year's supply of 3 ply, and you wouldn't even notice, like it wouldn't even be
Yeah.
point zero
Yeah.
zero percent of what you have, and once you reframe it that way, it's like, oh, it really cost me nothing to give my wife a smoother cleaning experience.
Well, it's crazy you brought that up because I didn't have a wife at the time, but when I had access, I was still buying single ply. I was still living in this damn apartment that had a leaking ceiling. Like every time it rained, it would leak, and the neighbors I could hear every single day. I had the means to buy a home for myself to be happy in, and I was so stuck in. I was mentally ill. Okay, so don't come at me too hard in the comments. I mean, feel free to talk to me about what you would do with a large sum of money you ran into quickly. But I had trouble just accepting that I had it to begin with, and it's amazing how far I was willing to go into the surplus of suffering because I was already feeling guilty about myself, so I felt guilty about having opportunity and abundance.
Mm,
Like I didn't deserve it, like it didn't actually exist, like it wasn't really real because, well, that's hard to explain unless you've been mentally ill on that level. I
yeah.
mean, at that time I was paranoid and there were other things happening. I thought people were following me around and
Yeah, and it also was like kind of overnight too. Like you got like
yeah,
lucky in a way. Like not to not say that you didn't analyze the stock, and you played your cards right, and you put thought into it, and that's part of why you had the success. But at the same time, it reminds me of I can't remember the exact statistics on it, but it's like most people that win the lottery end up kind of losing it all
mm,
very quick because they didn't like
yeah,
learn the skills of managing money and producing more money and making your money work for you. Like if you don't have that skill set and that mindset of, well, what do you do with the money once you have it? How can you enjoy the money, right? Because the money
yeah,
gives you an abundance of more choices, right? You have more choices with what you can do. And if you don't know what to do with so much choice that you have now, then it can be overwhelming, and you can fall into those traps of you were paranoid because you were so scared of losing this money. Same as the story of the
yeah,
guy that was scared to lose his gold, and he was just always dig it up and just to check to see if it's there, but he never got to use it, right? He never
yeah,
got to really enjoy it. It was just it made him feel safe. But
yeah,
I want everyone to ask themselves like, what are you gonna do with your riches when you are successful and when you have it all? What's the point of having all that money?
yeah.
What are you gonna
Once you
do with
get
it?
there,
Yeah. What are you gonna do with it? Because if you don't know what you're gonna do with it, it's just gonna sit there, and all you're gonna do is look at your bank account.
yeah. And that's what I was doing, and I'm so out of touch. I know it's so out of touch. I'm embarrassed to share it because there's so many people who a small cash infusion would make a huge difference in their life, or the idea that, oh, this person who I ran into who invested in this penny stock, he probably had some privilege that allowed him to do that, and that's true. I did have a graduation gift of about $4,000, and I had a partner that had faith in taking a risk with me, and so no one. It's not like I was self-made, but like you said, my ego, at least, was serving the whole. Like I got lucky, is what you said. That's what happened. But my ego was telling me it was all me. I knew it. I was right all along. Which a big part of me was feeling that way because I had my parents telling me this isn't a good idea. I don't know why you're taking such a big risk. Because I did take a big risk. I was in my early 20s and I thought this is the time, and I thought I was onto something, which I was, but I didn't ever imagine what was going to happen. And instead of thinking I was really lucky, I should now count my blessings. Back to gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out episode one. Uh, and I lacked gratitude, and I had to forgive myself on a delusional level. Shout out last episode, because forgiving yourself is, yeah, no one, we're not perfect, and we're definitely flawed individuals. And I've learned, I grew, and I'm happier now because I'm rich in other ways. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have that money, and I don't have access to that money, or I don't have money like that at all anymore. But I do have a wife who I love very much, who I feel so secure with, and a house where I'm happy. I don't need some abundance of cash. I have abundance of these other things that are more fulfilling. And I needed to live through that experience to really understand it. And, the same way someone might be hearing me talk and say, oh, I get it. But you don't really get it until you're in that position, or you don't really know what you're going to do or feel or say or change, how you're going to change. I'm proud to say I didn't think I was changing much, but I changed after.
Right. Yeah. Expensive lesson, but it seems like you have abundance that is much more valuable than just this oh, sum of money.
I had so much to learn, and I let my ego get too big. Um,
Right, it's an ego trap.
and Yeah, and sometimes the ego needs to be tempered, whether and this is controversial, but some people experience ego death through a certain psychedelic experience. It might adjust their perspective on the world. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying there is potential there, neuroplasticity. Reframing it is the important part. And what I'm trying to say is, it all depends on your perspective.
Oh man, I just lost the thing. I was trying to write down the thing so I wouldn't forget it. But you said ego death. Yeah, you said ego death, and I lost it because ego death is something that I want to say for a different episode. This is the third time that I think of it, and I hadn't said it.
Well,
Yeah,
I do have a study I could talk about.
yeah. Let's go into that, and it'll if it comes back, I'm gonna write it down for sure.
There was a study, I'm going to talk about a mouse study. I like talking about these mouse studies. I know we're not mice, but there are interesting confines where you can design an experiment. And it's around abundance and scarcity. Uh, it's actually there's a study. There's a man with the last name Calhoun who was doing studies with mice, and he made certain universes, what he called universes. And universe 25 was what he considered a sort of utopia of abundance, of when it came to food, water, nesting materials, and their safety. So the mice had their safety. They had food, water, nesting, and so they thrived initially. That's what happened. They thrived, but around day 300, there was 600 mice, and the only constraint in this experiment was space, because this is the Calhoun experiment, where he was trying to research population density and how it impacted social pathology. But population density was what he was trying to look at. But experimental design was flawed, because he also didn't have any the mice didn't have purpose, because they also lacked stimulation. There was nothing for them to entertain themselves, and there was also no need for them to go find the nesting materials. So they had so much abundance in that aspect. But so these mice were bored, and so around when there were 600 mice, the young mice started developing differently. Actually, the young mice, so the social bonds started forming less, differently. There was more social isolation. There was competition for space, so there was more aggression and violence, and even cannibalism. And as the days went on, and things got more and more mice were being produced, pregnancies were going down, asexuality started becoming prevalent, and there actually was a noted group of males who were fertile, who constantly groomed themselves all day, and they were called the beautiful ones. And they essentially were incels. They were no, they weren't incels. They were voluntarily the opposite of an incel. They were voluntarily not having intercourse or reproducing, but they did was care about their image. These are mice. I know it sounds crazy, but it was noted there was just a group of them that like devoted to their image and did not reproduce. And you know, by by day 1,000, they all actually pregnancy plummeted and babies weren't surviving, and the last mouse died by day 1,000, um, because they stopped reproducing. And it wasn't because there wasn't food and water. It's just social structure broke down, and they all basically forgot how to exist. And
Wow.
so it's a strange thing because there's scarcity in some ways, there's abundance in
Yeah,
other
yeah.
ways.
It goes to show that you could have everything that you need, and then you could still self-destruct.
Yeah, and social media is abundance in the idea in the sense that everybody's packed into this one space, this one comment section, let's say, or they're all intercoursing on this one social media platform. Everyone's on X, and you're leaving comments, and there's one person feels this way, this other person. We have such an abundance of information,
Mm-hmm.
and it's some of it's accurate, some of it's not accurate, some of it's not perfect, some of it is what you agree with, some of it's not what you agree with. So how you engage with that really matters. People talk about doom scrolling, and I feel like there's actually different ways to doom scroll. If you Some people scroll in comment sections looking for a fight,
Yeah.
looking to correct somebody, looking, or they're eager to type a comment and make a correction, like, oh, this video wasn't perfect, or they're missing something and I need to tell my part, like there's some need to share your part. um, but sometimes that's not necessary.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that study?
No, that's crazy. And yeah, sometimes even when you have everything that you could want, you can find a way to not feel like you have enough, right? Uh, Mess it up in one way or another. I'm really looking forward to when we talk about self-sabotage. Really, they do a whole episode on that. And
It's worthy of one, that's
yeah,
for sure.
and what I wanted to
So
say earlier was about that how abundance comes in many ways. Um, just because you were sharing your story,
yeah,
and there's it's just a great way to count those blessings, because it's not just money for abundance, right? Like you said, time
absolutely.
time is one.
um,
Having time freedom, having your health is a kind of freedom. Having love is abundance. Um, and the dude, I was not expecting the mice to like die off. Like,
it's surprising. Yeah, I mean, population density makes sense. Like, okay, well, at some point there's too many of them, so what are they going to do? But for asexuality to develop, it, because I know we're talking about mice, not people, but something about social structures breaking down is what really jumped out at me. Like, okay, because what are our social structures? They have social hierarchies in mice actually, where there's certain ways that they're documented to behave, which is part of the reason why they were able to prove that social structure broke down, is because normally they do this, they act this way, they develop this way. But and then the young were growing up in a world where there was more violence. The young were growing up in a world where the social bonds are not there.
mm,
And I was thinking about kids growing up in a world where they're not playing on the street with their neighbors, and the social bonds are different. They're over the internet or through screens,
I yeah,
and so people are so ego involved. I mean, I don't know if mice have egos, but for some reason a group of mice decided to groom themselves endlessly and stay as clean as possible,
yeah,
and isolate themselves. So
yeah. Imagine a society that's just so focused on having the perfect social media page, but it's all a show, right? Like, what people post on social media is not usually an honest reflection of their everyday lives. It's usually just the highlight reel. And yeah, imagine if over time everyone just was comparing their lives and their sense of worth based on like what everyone else is posting, and it's like, oh, I need to post better, I need to go to cooler places, or like the
Or I can't have a kid because I need to go to these cool places, or I need to be this the best social media influencer. Having a kid's gonna ruin my career, or and nothing wrong with not having kids. It's more like, okay, well, this is having kids is less of a obvious thing that people are doing, and more and more of a, people are choosing not to, and it's not. I'm not saying we're the mice in Universe 25, but it's interesting to think about. I think deeply, and maybe I'm actually losing relevance, but I like to use studies like that to help me kind of reflect on society that we're in.
yeah, I think they're very useful tools because even though yeah we're different from mice, but we do have a lot of similarities, and like we have brains and nervous systems and social structures, and we can learn a lot from that. Like I always think of that one study where there was another kind of like rat utopia, and they had the the choice, I guess, of like whether they wanted to get water or get like opium or something.
Oh yes,
But
I know what you're talking
but
about.
because like they were living like happy, healthy, fulfilling social lives, like they had things to do, right? They weren't bored. It was like Ratopia. They had like parks and they had things to do, an abundance of food. So even though they had a super addictive substance there, they didn't want to use it because they were living happy, fulfilling lives. But yeah, anything else that we missed that you wanted to share, Brett? We went over a
Well,
lot.
when I ran into that large sum of money, I was with a partner who invested it with me, who invested some of their money with me, and I insisted they did it through their own means, their own bank accounts, so it was theirs. They disagreed. I mean, I was engaged with her, so it was complicated. So, but after I cut off the engagement, she was certainly entitled to some of
Right.
this this stuff. So we came to some agreement. We had disagreements about what she thought she was entitled to, and I really hated to be in that position because we ran into a lot of abundance, and it shouldn't have mattered that much. But we determined I would transfer a certain amount of shares of this company to her. The company being ABAT, if anyone's interested, the symbol. But it took a few weeks to transfer, and I went over to her new apartment where she had moved out at that point, and we were at least we weren't friends by any means, but it was past the initial phase of breaking up, and I told her, and I said, "Looks like you got your portion of your shares transferred today." And I was expecting her to be happy because the total sum of the shares that were transferred over that day, she received $250,000 worth of shares, um, based on a small investment that she had made, and she wasn't happy. And I said, "Are you not happy about that?" And then she gave me this look and she said, "Well, you have more."
Mm,
And it was heartbreaking to hear that. It was also confirming to me that I made the right decision, but the fact that she wasn't excited about it because she was so hung up on
yeah.
what I had. There's always a bigger fish somewhere. There's always somebody who's going to have more than you. With that mindset, it's just going to be a life of suffering, a little bit too much suffering, rather than saying, "Wow, this is a big windfall that didn't have to happen.
Yeah.
This is a gift." And she had reasons to be mad at me, so it's not her fault, but
Yeah.
very in line.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, someone told me yesterday that it's better to distance yourself from those people that are not able to be happy for your happiness, for your success.
Yeah,
Like even if it is just like because of their past or whatever it might be, where it's like they haven't learned, but it's just unfortunately it's a bad vibe. And if you're supposed to be someone's friend and you can't be happy that they're successful
yes,
and you somehow make it about you not being enough, or why are they so lucky, why don't I get lucky, then
yeah. they think you're bragging
Yeah.
because you're sharing. And there were some friends where I was kind of reluctant, like maybe I should just keep this to myself, and it made me isolate myself from my friends more because I wasn't sure if it was even relevant. I was like, okay, no, it doesn't matter. And then
Yeah.
yeah, it's wise words what you said.
Yeah. Compersion can be a skill that not just in relationships, but like being happy for someone else's success. It it says that you're grounded in yourself, that you're
Yeah,
okay with seeing other people succeed, and it doesn't change anything about what about you.
yeah. So yeah, between compersion and jealousy, generosity and greed, it's all tied to abundance and scarcity, and where the mind is, how it's functioning. You're a product of your environment, but you're also able to shift and frame your environment because the world is mental first. And so today's episode hopefully sheds some light on the mindset of scarcity, the mindset of abundance, and where they come from, where they can lead, and some of the antidotes that can prevent you from getting off balance and off kilter.
That's right. That's right. Suffering grows when we believe that there isn't enough, right? Not enough for us, not enough for others, or not enough within ourselves. But we have a lot to offer. We have a lot to give. So if you want to battle greed, go be more giving, right? If you want more time, be more giving with your time. If you want more money, be more giving with your money. Circulate it, all right? Don't hoard it. What you give will come back. And, be happy for other people's success. It makes you be happy as well. You gain from that too, right? When we shift from comparison to charity and clarity, and from lack to awareness, from ego to truth, we can actually stop chasing, right? Stop chasing the more, be more, have more, but we can just start living lives for what makes us happy. Right? You don't need
Yes,
more to be enough, right? You already are enough as you are.
exactly. Contentment is possible, and you don't have to have it all to have that. Thank you for listening, everybody. This was a beautiful conversation, and we're thankful for anyone who's watching and listening. And don't be afraid to like and subscribe.
Yeah, share.
We love you all. Peace.
Thanks for the support, y'all. See you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.